Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Pringle, and I'm the president of Gullah Business of Charleston. And I have the vice president here, Tiffany Savage.
Hello.
And today we have a special guest. We have Queen Ella Pringle here. She's a licensed therapist, and we're gonna get all the information here. She has a office here in the Low Country area. So thank you, Queen, for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me, ladies. I'm so excited to be here with you both.
So just to get started, how did you get started in this field?
So I got started a long time ago, and it wasn't actually my direct path. I had joined, so out of college, I went to Clark Atlanta University for undergrad, and I joined the U.S. Air Force. So after I joined the Air Force, I got stationed overseas. And when you're overseas, even if you're not like within, even if you're stateside, you're not within your immediate state where you have family. When you're at a distance, like your coworkers, your friends, everybody becomes your family. So around 2007, around 2007, 2008-ish, once again, lots of coworkers. I was security forces, so I was a cop. So we had, big deployment cycles, and this family had came in and she was expecting, and she didn't know she was expecting. So at that point, I had traded places with her, and I was actually going to deploy in her place. Her husband was my squad leader. So we like kind of developed this bond and relationship just off the bat. So fast forward a little bit, I end up not going on that deployment, but her husband went, and she was expecting their third child. So like with the military, the first one, they try to get you home. The second one, they might try. The third one, they're like, all right, you got this down pat. So you can do this. But at that point, since we already developed this relationship, I kind of became like the pseudo husband. Like I went with her to doctor's appointments, made sure she stayed on a good eating plan. We worked out together. We did all these things. And I was there for the birth. And I brought her son into this world. And it was a beautiful experience. And at that time, I never knew what a doula was. It wasn't something that I was looking towards professionally, spiritually, nothing. I was just there. I was just doing what I was supposed to do because it was the right thing to do. And this is the season that I was in. And at this time I was still active duty. So that's when I think back on it, that was like really the time where my path just started to align with working with families. And being in the military, you can be gone here, there, anywhere at any given time. And those do create traumatic experience, especially when there's young kids involved. So even working with this particular family this intimately, it was really like an eye opener of, okay, I I I understand the challenges that they're facing and able to help them kind of mitigate a lot of those challenges. So once again, didn't think nothing of it. A few years later, when I had my daughter, um, I didn't know anything about breastfeeding or anything because, that's not something that is talked about widely in the African American culture. Like, at least from my experience, we're taught to, they get formula or, whatever, as soon as they're born. We don't talk about like the breastfeeding practices, if it's accepted, if it's not, like those things. So when I had my daughter, my immediate thought was, okay, I'm going to give her formula. My lactation nurse was like, no, Queen, you're going to put her on your breast. And I was like, okay, well, I'll try anything, and tried it, fell in love with it. And then I became a lactation consultant myself. So at that point, I was helping families, especially new moms, with when they're bringing their babies into this world, helping them to understand, the connections and the attachments that come with breastfeeding, and just really providing a lot of education and support to mothers and to their partners as well, because it's a tandem thing. It's not just a one person thing. Um, and so that was like another segue into this path that I was just here for at that particular time. Um, a few months later, I started my master's program, and I actually started it in mental health counseling. Um, and I had to do a project, for this project, I had to interview my mother and do a genogram. So a genogram goes in depth, at least 3 generations of and lots of family information, like sicknesses. It goes through like it identifies a lot of key elements in a family. And when we talked about her birthing process, she opened up to me for the first time and told me that she had postpartum depression. And at that point, that shifted our relationship, because then I knew that a lot of the challenges that I experienced growing up, how I felt like we didn't have a close relationship, now it was like the veil was lifted, because now I can understand we missed a lot of those early attachment times that would have solidified our relationship. We didn't have that because she had postpartum depression. But in the early 80s, who was talking about postpartum depression? You have your baby, you get back to work. That was it. Or it was taboo to talk about what's wrong with you, because we don't talk about what's wrong with us in many Black families, right? So that right there is where it put like the nail in the wall and said, okay, I'm definitely working with families. There's no more running from it at this point. I am definitely working with families, because there's so many relationships that needs to be healed over things that we don't know inherently. So that's kind of how I got started. And it was a long journey, because I delivered that first baby that I told you about. He just turned 16 a couple of weeks ago. So it's been about a 16-year like journey up until this point, but really doing the work from the time I started with lactation, it's been about 14 years.
Oh, wow.
That's amazing. Well, before I even get jump into my question, thank you again for your service and what you've done, because
Thank
words
you.
cannot express all the sacrifices that you all make and what you've been able to do with military families. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank
One
you.
thing that you hit on, you talked about how, during this project with your mom, you found out she had postpartum depression. And one of the things going into this, when we found out you were doing counseling, we wanted to know too how trauma can affect you as a child and your parenting styles. What's the relationship with that? Can you tell a little bit how things that you experience as a child can affect your parenting styles, and how it, like, if you feel comfortable, how it possibly even affected you because once you found out with your mom, what she went through?
Definitely, definitely. So, in addition to being a licensed counselor, I'm also an infant and early childhood mental health consultant as well. So, I work with the little itty bitties from 0 to 5. And a lot of the work that I do with that is all about attachment and relationships. So, when we look at childhood trauma, a lot of it just boils down to, and I don't want to say just because I don't want to minimize it, but a lot of it boils down to those early caregivers, um, and those first few days, those first few weeks and months, and those experiences leading up to, even prenatally. A lot of what that attachment and that bonding looks like, that reflects in the relationships that in the way that you grow up, in the relationships that you have as a child and as an adult. And so in my case, when I had that discussion with my mother, and one of the specific areas that I work with is mother-daughter relationships, because those are very hard relationships, especially if there's some tension that is surrounding their relationship, whether it was developmentally or relationally, how someone may have come in, whatever the case is, it's always a trying time between mothers and daughters. So our relationship changed at that point, because then I understood her differently. I learned a lot of grace. Um, I understood why when I was a teenager and I was going through, typical teenage stuff, fighting with my best friend, fighting with my boyfriend, things like that. Like, we couldn't connect because when it boils down to it, when babies are born, they look for those caregivers to provide that safety for them, right? And if you don't provide that safety over time, they learn that, okay, this is not a safe space. So when we grow up and we have these situations and we're crying out, even in an older age, our body is holding that same feeling of, this is not a safe space for me. So when babies cry and we go pick them up, they learn, okay, this face, I know this face. This voice, I know this voice. This nurturance, I know this. I know that when I cry next time, I'm going to get my needs met. But on the adverse, when they don't get their needs met and when they cry and no one comes for them, they're left to self-soothe and kind of deal with it on their own. And that's how they grow up. And so that creates a disconnect in the bond later on in life.
So it's like you have almost like you could be grown, but when it comes to certain things, you're still kind of that child, that place where you had that trauma.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Mm.
It stays within you.
Yeah, it stays. You just stay. The times go by, the years go by, but it still stays. So what common challenges do families have when it comes to trauma?
A lot of different challenges. One of the main ones is enmeshment. So enmeshment is when you have, so to speak, everybody's in everybody's business, right? So you have everyone is contributing their opinions. Everyone has a say-so in your daily life. There's no independence. So that is a huge challenge because, we grow up to a certain point wanting, requiring the advice and the guidance of our parents and our elders and people around us. But we come to a certain age where we have to break away, which is, typically that college age or that launching phase where they're going off to kind of find their independence. But there's still this stronghold where I can't make this decision without this person. And there's never that breakaway of making those independent decisions to have that independent life. So when I get people that I'm working with and they're feeling like, I can't get so-and-so out of my business. Every time I do something, she has an opinion, and they have these strongholds, it's because of the family enmeshment. Mm-hmm. So the key to that is really learning yourself. And you can still have, I'm big on family values. So you can still honor your family values. You can still honor the ways, to which your ancestors and your elders, you can still honor those things, but you still have to differentiate yourself and have your own mind, assert your own opinion, live your own life's path and not someone else's,
Yeah.
And so that is really one of the major challenges in families, and it creates a whole lot of tension. If you can imagine, it creates tons of tension.
And so for you to put a name on this is very, very empowering, because I think a lot of people deal with that and they didn't know, like, you can sense, like, for instance, you can sense when something's wrong, but sometimes you can't put your finger on it. You're like,
right.
Something's not right with this. I know it's wrong, but but putting a name to it, recognizing it, and the fact that you see a lot of this, you do
a
see
lot,
it.
right?
Yeah, a lot. And
It's always
again,
goes back. Yeah. Go. I'm sorry, Tiff.
Oh no, it's fine. I was just gonna say, a lot of times you just hit it right there. Like, you don't want to be disrespectful, especially if it's coming from your elders. You don't want to be disrespectful. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what would you say? How would someone be able to establish those boundaries in a respectful way?
Right. So, it takes a lot of conversation, because I remember growing up, people used to say to me all the time, anytime I say something, you got a smart mouth. I'm like, well, or stop being smart. Like, well, what you want me to be dumb? I don't understand. I like, you help me understand this, but then you being smart when you say that, right?
Mhm.
So it's like you got to have conversations. And sometimes it is difficult because a lot of our elders, they are set in their ways. You know, it's respect or disrespect, and that's just a fine line. But a lot of times, if we help them to understand like how we're feeling about it, then they're able to open up to think about it a little bit more, because it's not going to happen overnight, but they'll be able to think about a little bit more. Maybe my approach was wrong. Maybe I said the wrong words. And, you know, that always leads to, we may not receive an apology, but forgiveness is not for the other person. Forgiveness is for ourselves. So that's what grace is all about, right? Like we understand, like, okay, they come from a different time. They may not apologize for what they said, but I spoke my piece and I still forgive them for it. But setting boundaries is difficult, and you have to work on yourself first. Definitely developing, you know, that confidence, that self-esteem, in order to, because you can set the boundary and the boundary can fall.
Yeah.
So set the boundary, and holding the boundary is the hard part.
That's deep right there.
Yeah, because I'm like zoning. I'm like, because I'm thinking about, you know, as you get older, right? You start thinking about stuff in your life, and it usually happens at a part like where something traumatic happened or something. You're just like, okay, this happened and it affected you, carried it until you got older. And now you start processing it a little bit differently. And so somebody that's out there, what advice would you give to somebody that's out there that is now at that stage where they remember something that happened traumatic in their life, and now they're at that place, and how would you say is a way for them to deal with it? What steps should they take to deal with that trauma?
Absolutely. If there's anything that I can do, anywhere I can break the stigma, get help, to either with a therapist or a counselor, because working through, like, just addressing your trauma, just having this recollection of the memory, that can bring up a lot of emotions at that moment that you might not be able to handle, right? And so when you're working with the therapist that works with trauma, because a lot of times when I work with people that have experienced trauma, a lot of it is about just helping them feel comfortable in telling their story, and telling their story in a way that is 100% to what they recall it to be. Because a lot of times, if they've ever told the story before, they've cut out pieces because of shame. So I don't want them to know this piece. Guilt, I don't want them to know this piece. So when you're working with someone who is versed in working with traumatic populations, you feel comfortable enough to tell the whole story and not feel judged, and throw down those feelings of guilt and shame, and really truly get it all out. Getting it all out is healing in itself.
You just said that, and it reminded me. I just saw B. Simone's podcast with Dr. Bryant on, and I could see Dr. Bryant like challenging her to don't hold it all in, because she's still holding back a lot. Because, okay, for example, with that situation with B. Simone, I don't know her whole story. She didn't say everything, but let's say there's something traumatic that happened, but that story has to do with, let's say, your mom and your dad. So then if you tell that whole story, you're telling kind of their business too. So how does that play a part when somebody's, you know, talking about their trauma and they're trying to get it out? How important is it to, I guess, for them, you kind of telling everybody's business? Like, how does someone get through that?
Well, we ethically uphold confidentiality. So that's the first thing that we say before we start working with a client. You know, we talk about confidentiality, we talk about privacy, we talk about, you know, all of the exceptions. And then I reiterate that during the process, because I want to remind them that what you say here, this is a safe space. And I'm not just saying that to be cliche, but like what you say in these walls, stay in these walls. You know, with the exception of if you're going to hurt yourself, someone else, and all of those specific things that we have to annotate. But just reminding them that what you say here stays here. If I know your mama, don't worry, I'm not telling your mama nothing. And, you know, Charleston is very small and we have literally like 2 degrees of separation here. And so I truly uphold that, you know, no matter what you say to me about someone else, it stays here because that's what you need to say in this moment.
I'm also wondering too, going back to that question, because I was watching this podcast today, and it was so hard for her to get anything out. Like,
well, you got to think something that when you experience something traumatic and you've suppressed it for so long, of course it's going to be hard to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy because physiologically, you might experience these things within your body all over again.
Yeah, you're going to relive it. Wow.
You're going to relive it. You're going to have these feelings throughout your body all over again because once again, the trauma holds in the body.
Yeah. And I applaud B. Simone for taking that step to seek the necessary help, but also to, it's not judgmental, but it's just like to just be reflective of a certain situation. If the trauma was so hurtful, it impacted her in such a way. I kind of think about the medium in which she used her counseling. Like, for instance, like if you were to do it that everybody could see, I could see that feel more pressure on you not to say everything.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's like everybody can go back and listen to this.
Right.
And I think
that's a hard level of vulnerability.
It really is. And I know me personally, if, you know, I don't know if I would be comfortable in front of everybody where they can go back to recording and listen to, you know. But then also too, this brings up a good point that sometimes when you go through counseling, you may think that you're the only one that needs counseling, but sometimes when, like, especially with family trauma, it may be everybody involved around you. So with conversations like that, I know you have to have them with your family, like, hey, can you go to counseling? But what type of advice would you give to individuals that are at a point that they sought the counseling that they needed, and now it's at that point, let me bring my family in? What advice would you give them or encouragement if they're venturing off to that step?
Right. You know, that's a great question. And that's one of the hard things about family counseling is because one person might be at a place where, you know, they're ready to take this next step and have these hard conversations with someone else. And that other person might be unwilling to come to counseling because of the stigma. And at that point, you know, we have to just discuss more about how this healing is for you as an individual. You know, we can hope that this other person may come in, but maybe if this is a conversation that you can have one-on-one with them and see, you know, how that conversations go. So we do some role playing, right? So where, you know, we can discuss a specific scenario and kind of play it out. But one of the main things with helping someone confront a family member is helping them to keep their emotional regulation under control, right? Because a lot of times we can become dysregulated and then we're shouting, we're screaming, everybody's cursing, people are crying, and nothing is productive. And we just added more oil to the fire. But when we can emotionally regulate ourselves, we know what our boundary is with that person. We know what our threshold is. We know what our body feels like. So with this self-awareness, we know what our body feels like when we're getting to a point where I'm feeling flooded. Like I'm feeling completely flooded with emotion. I'm about to cry. My palms is getting sweaty. My body temperature is rising. Basically, my cortisol levels are getting higher. And at that point, I need to step back. I need to step back. I need to re-engage. I need to go, take a breath. I need to do something else to kind of calm myself down, because I won't be able to truly articulate what I'm feeling at that point without hitting an emotional level. And then our conversation is going to go wayward.
Mm.
So even if that person is not able to, and it's a pretty serious, conversation that needs to have, I'll work with that individual one-on-one to help them gain that self-awareness over their body, understand their body, work on, communicating what is their feeling. So using like I statements, identifying what they're feeling, and being able to discuss that in a way that's not criticizing, but saying, I'm feeling frustrated because you did X, Y, Z, and this is how it's impacting me. Mm-hmm. That's a different portrayal of communicating than criticizing, saying, well, you did this to me, you did that to me, and because you did this is how I feel. Because you think about it, once you're feeling criticized, if somebody was pointing the finger saying, you, are you listening? Or are you just like, all right, I'm going in defense mode?
Defense mode.
Right. So I teach them, and we work through how to use these I statements, how to truly say what it is that you're feeling without criticizing, without feeling overwhelmed with emotion. And then knowing what that boundary is. If you're feeling like your body is getting to that point where I'm about to hit the roof, all right, I need to draw back.
Mm-hmm. That's an exercise. It
is
that
all the time, every day.
You got to practice that. Like, okay, let's bring it back. Yeah. Wow. I have a question. Somebody, let's say for someone that says, you know what, I was thinking about getting a therapist. There's some things I want to work through. What are some, like, I guess, checklist or some things they should prepare when they say, okay, I'm looking for somebody? Like, how should they get ready for that, I guess?
Yeah, excellent. So if they're looking for a therapist, one, of course, they want to check to see if they're going to be paying private pay. What can they afford? Like, long term, at least 3 to 6 months. Because you have some people that they will say, yes, I can do it. And then the first 3 sessions, like, you can't expect a turnaround. Like, we talking about 34 years of trauma. You can't turn that around in 3 sessions, right? So we need some time. Like, we need some time. We need something else. We need to build a relationship. So looking at that, looking if you're going to be using insurance, just kind of looking at fiscally how you'll be able to support it. And then when you're looking for someone, there's all different kinds of ways that you can find people. You can find people social media. A lot of these directories have counselors available in certain areas, Psychology Today, all kinds of directories. You can put in, like, what your main pain point is. Like, for me, a lot of people put in parenting, and then I'll come up for parenting issues. So, that's a way that they can find them. And then internally, I would say, and I think this is very important, because even while I was going to my own therapist, because I'm telling you, your therapist needs to have a therapist. Period. Your therapist needs to have a therapist.
Yeah.
We hold so much of other people's stuff in addition to our own. We have to have someone else. Okay. That's just mental wellness on our part, right? So I would do this myself in the past as well, when I was looking for a therapist, just finding, okay, what is it that I'm really struggling with right now that I need help? Because it can be a long list of things, but what's the thing that's keeping me up at night? And then I identify that, and I identify that person. I give free 15-minute consultations, because that gives, my potential client an opportunity to talk to me and find out how they like me, how we interact, if they want to continue with me, if they don't want to continue with me. It's important to kind of establish that up front, because you don't want to be sitting with someone for an hour and you don't feel comfortable talking to them. you know,
Mm-hmm.
because
Yeah.
at that point you're not making good use of your time nor your money, and those are resources that we can't get back. Money you can get back, but that's not good use of your resources, right? So I would definitely say utilize those free 15-minute consultations when you see them, and talk to them, ask questions, ask them, you know, you can let them know, like, I have a traumatic background. Do you work with people who have experienced trauma?
Mm.
And to what degree? Because some people is not familiar or comfortable with working with certain types of trauma.
Okay.
So, you know, those are legit questions to ask, because I want to know that if I'm talking to you about something that's really bothering me, that you can hold that space for me.
I want to ask a couple questions on different topics, because the fact that you do family and trauma counseling, that's a big deal right
That's
there.
good.
I know you see divorces. I know you probably have seen everything, not only for divorces, but transitioning, where blended families come into play, childhood trauma. So my other question is this, and the other thing too was interesting, you deal with maternal counseling too,
Mm-hmm.
and everything with that. So one question in particular I have is, how do you help parents maintain like a healthy relationship to prioritize, their children?
Right.
How do you help them with that whole array of trauma, transitioning? How do you even handle that or approach that?
Yeah. So, you know, anytime a family is going through a change, it's a different transition. So, whether they are having their first child, that's one transition from 2 to 3. And then, of course, whatever challenges you was having in your relationship beforehand, it's not going to just stop because you added a baby, right? So we got to work on those things all throughout. But even if this is a second child, because some siblings don't want that baby over there. They like that baby taking up my limelight. So working with siblings, right? Bringing a new baby in, all of these things. Um, the biggest thing for couples is, you know, to just really be intentional about their relationship. Of course, you know, it's so important to have a support system. And I understand sometimes it gets really hard, especially if you live away from family, but identifying key friends that's within your network, that can help you. And we struggle so much with accepting help and asking for help. And that's something that we truly have to work on, as a culture, is because there's people there to help us, but sometimes we just don't feel comfortable
Mhm.
asking. And so creating that support network is so important. That was something that truly helped me when I had my kids. Mind you, I lived in Europe for 13 years. So I had both of my kids overseas, and none of my family was there. But like I said, you know, your people that you work with and your friends, they become your family. Had I not had that support system, because I too, once I had my daughter, I struggled with anxiety, postpartum anxiety. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was normal. Um, and because I was a part of such a tight knit community, which was my breastfeeding community, I was able to work through those things with other moms that was going through the same thing. So really having community, really having a support system is so important, for any parents, whether it's the first, second, or third child, because they have to be really intentional about the relationship that they have with each other, you know, so that way they can communicate better and they can get along better. And that creates a better environment for the child that's growing up. Um, One of the things that I work with when I work with parents is addressing like their experiences that they grew up with. And a lot of times, like they don't want to have children and have their children be raised the way they were. You know, just in homes that was a lot of yelling, a lot of discipline, like just a lot of these negative things that kind of spilled over into their adult life. And it wasn't never addressed. But now that they're having a baby, now all of this is surfacing. And so we work with that as well. And, just identifying those things, talking through them. Once again, we extend forgiveness. Even if that parent has transitioned on, we still extend forgiveness because they're holding that emotion inside of them and they need a way to get it out. And that helps them to be a better parent.
Yeah, you just said something right now, and I think that's a powerful point right here. When you talk about forgiveness, can you explain how important forgiveness is?
Forgiveness is so important. We have, anytime you have a relationship, you're going to have a disagreement. It's the inevitable, right? So we call those ruptures. So you have these ruptures. And I was just talking to someone about this yesterday and explaining to them, you have ruptures and repairs. Now, oftentimes we have these ruptures in our relationships and we leave it like that. No one comes back to say, I'm sorry. No one come back to say, hey, let's talk through this a little bit more and get to a better solution. No one tries to repair that. And when that happens, that causes like a longevity of troubled relationships. Like that basically severs the relationship from then on. And even when you are in the same company, because it's a family member, it's like, it's not genuine, right? And you can feel that tension there. When you come to a place where you want to grow within yourself, one of the hardest things to do, and I would truly say it's hard to do, is to extend forgiveness to someone who never asked for it. Because to them, they may not feel like they did anything wrong. But for you, you feel like it was wrong. But why do you give them the power to say, I'll apologize when I'm ready? So you're holding on to that hope. And it may never happen. So when you want to grow within yourself, you really have to just look at this relationship and the situation that occurred and say, okay, I can forgive them despite the fact that they have not asked for forgiveness. But I don't want to hold on to this anger. I don't want to hold on to this rage. I don't want to hold on to this emotion because it's not tearing them apart. It's tearing me apart.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, when people are really angry at each other, they say, oh, the next time I see them, I'm going to say this. But how many times do you have to replay that situation in your mind just to remember what happened so you can remember what you're going to say when you see that person? It may not be for months or years.
You just torturing yourself the whole time.
The whole time.
Hours are going by, days are going by. You messing, you could have been having a good time over here with these people, and you're here thinking about that. Yeah,
exactly. So when you really want to grow within yourself, you realize I have to just let that go. And then guess what? I set the boundary.
And that can be hard. That can be difficult.
It can be hard because sometimes we got to do that with our loved ones.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Tiffany. Tiffany set the boundary with me. Like, nope. I'm like, boundary set.
But you do gotta deal with everybody. I think that's like me and Nicole have conversations all the time. Like, even though we're cousins, it's also country, we're cousins and we're sisters at the same time. Because we all like Nicole's like the closest thing I have to a sister. We be fussing and stuff, but we get back on the same terms, But it's just like we have conversations about forgiveness and all sorts of stuff. And just like you said, it can be hard with family. It can be hard with friends because, especially with family, because you can't choose your family.
You can't.
But you have to work through it. And I think one of the things that really affect our community is the fact that we really don't talk about certain things like postpartum depression or anxiety. We don't talk about those bonds that you have when, like for instance, you don't talk about the bonds that someone has when they're actually carrying a child and how it can affect them and how they go forward in raising other people. When you don't think about that, because that can affect someone even if that's their biological child or not, because
Yeah.
they're around them.
Yeah.
And I don't think people realize all that. And just for us having this discussion, my prayer is that anybody that watches this can start realizing, acknowledging some things and say, hey, I want to change too
Right.
in my household, my family, and how can I do this? Because we get stuck because it's overwhelming.
It
It's very
is.
much stuck.
It is. And it comes up at any point. And um, sometimes we pass these things on without even realizing it. So, for instance,
Mhm.
you have two aunts that don't get along, and then a family function comes up or something comes up, and then they tell their kids, well, don't go over there and play with them,
Mhm.
and then like, okay, so these kids now get older, and then they done tell their kids, well, no, we don't play with them. I
Mhm.
haven't played with them since I was younger. No, we don't deal with them. So now the
Mhm.
third and fourth generation come along and they don't even know each other.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they don't even know the reason why I started half the time.
Don't even know.
Don't
Or
They
even
they
don't
may
even
know.
know a
know.
little piece of it, but it's not enough to even put it all together to really understand it.
And then it comes back to, really? Over
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Y'all
It'd be
could have
something.
talked that
There you
through.
go. There you go.
You
Over
know
there.
what I mean? And so
When
now
you
here
found
we
that out,
are.
you thought, well, bigger. You
It'd be
said
something so
Right.
there's some more,
small.
right? Over there.
So here we
There.
are 3 and 4 generations now later trying to get to know our cousins for the first time
Mm.
because y'all was mad 50 years ago because what? She had
Somebody
on the
didn't
same
say hi to
outfit as you.
somebody. Yeah.
It'd be
Right.
something
Yep.
crazy.
Somebody didn't say hi to somebody because they couldn't hear them or they were in the zone. They didn't know it.
Right.
It's
It'd
big.
be
You
something
you act like
silly.
you too good. Yeah. It'd be stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then it'd be big stuff too, where people did acknowledge some things that were happening, some real
Yep.
wrong.
Absolutely.
So
Yep.
I've seen both extremes and I've heard both extremes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
But I think this is what you do is powerful work. It is. It's not for the weak at heart, I tell you that.
It's
It
not.
is not. It is not.
And I
It is
respect
not.
that you said a therapist has to have a therapist because
Yes.
there's no way in the world you could sit and hear all this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. It's
uh-uh.
challenging. It's challenging, but it's also very rewarding. Because I do a lot of education when I do therapy because we was always taught to like not ask questions. Don't ask me why, just do what I say.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to know. Like we need to know. We need to be educated. So I do a lot of education because when we understand better, we can do better. It's not just oh, I know how to tie my shoe, so I'm gonna always keep my shoe tied.
Mm-hmm.
No, when we understand why I need to keep my shoe tied because it's gonna keep me safe, it's gonna keep me from busting my lip, like then I could do better. So it's really important for us to really be educated on what does trauma look like, on what does anxiety look like, what does anxiety in children look like it is so important for us to understand these things. And even when I work with families that are going through separation and divorce, it's important to help them understand, like, okay, you may not be saying something directly to your child about the other parent, but drywall ain't soundproof. They hear
Mhm.
everything. They hear every argument. They hear every word, and they are internalizing all of it. And they may not say it. They may not say nothing to you about it, but I guarantee you, it's going to be reflected in their behavior at some point.
Mhm.
I just want to circle back on something because you said something we've heard about postpartum depression, but you said postpartum anxiety. If you can explain that.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah. So we have different. There's it's not just postpartum depression. There's the mood and anxiety disorders that
Mm-hmm.
kind of accompany the whole perinatal period. So the perinatal period is from the moment the stick turns blue or the two lines come from that moment on till a year at least after the birth of a child. Okay, so that whole period. So during that whole period, if you think about it, you have pregnancy hormones, you have the birthing hormones, you have all these lactation hormones. And then once the body starts to recalibrate and you've done lactating, whether you decide to breastfeed or not, now you're back to your menses, right? Mm-hmm. So all of these hormones, all of these things, your body is going through all of these changes. So some women go through mood disorders. Some women get a lot of anxiety. It can be like OCD. It just really depends on the person and what their prior history is. But, you know, it's really important to be aware, one, of, you know, your family history, because that could be a predetermining factor. So like, for instance, I didn't find out that my mother had postpartum depression until I did that assignment, which was after I had my daughter. So that kind of clicked, because I said, okay, so this is why I'm feeling this way. I'm already, you know, my mother had this with me. So the likelihood of me having this is just a little bit greater, but now I understand why. Mm-hmm. Okay. So those anxieties, you know, it looks different for everyone, but for me, we lived in Italy and our stairs was like the marble type stairs. And I was really anxious of going down the stairs and dropping my baby. Yeah. And it was so bad that my husband at the time, he would leave for work at 4:30 in the morning, and I would wake up with him so he can help me walk down the stairs, and I would stay downstairs all day until he came home, because I was so anxious of that. Like, I was so anxious until I realized, and I got the support that I needed through the community, that, you know, it was okay and I was going to be okay. And just kind of talking through a lot of those anxieties and doing a lot of rationalizing in my mind to say, we're going to be okay. Like, we're going to be safe. But it was that fear. So, you know, I express, when moms are expecting, to identify that person in their life that they can talk candidly with and let them know their anxieties and their fears, you know, so that way they can kind of be aware and have that open ear to say, okay, this is beginning to be a bit too excessive. Let's get some help. Yeah. I'm concerned and I want to make sure that you're well. So let's go talk to someone. And it's such a beautiful thing when someone can say, let's go talk to someone, opposed to, you need to go talk to someone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
support is everything.
It's everything.
So the last question, we always conclude every single feature that we have with these three words. We ask everyone, what 3 words would you use to describe your passion for your field? And so in your case, what are 3 words that you would use to describe counseling and your passion for it and your drive? And why would you use these words?
So I would say observing instead of judging, empathetic instead of fearful, and support healing instead of trying to fix someone or fix their situation.
Oh, wow.
Just changing the language on how we approach people in therapy and holding their life experiences in a non-judgmental way, being truly empathetic to their experiences, and support them in their healing journey.
That can be kind of rough sometimes too.
It can be rough. It can be rough.
Wow. I always get shocked. I always get stuck when everybody says they're three. I'm always like reflecting back, like, okay, what they're saying. I'm like, wow, that's why words are so important.
It
And
is.
I love that Tiffany came up with this elevator like pitch, question, because the words, the language that we're using to
Mhm.
describe is so powerful. I'm always like stopping, like, oh wow, they said this.
Right. Well, that's why I named my counseling practice Sankofa,
Mm,
because I believe that our family values are so enriched in how we develop into people.
mm,
And, the Sankofa meaning is to going back, so fetching back, to retrieve and to bring it into the future. And I bring that into my counseling spaces because we go back into, how we was raised, how we was brought up, how our parents were brought up, the relationships we have with our grandparents. I have all of those conversations because those impact how we are today, and they inevitably impact how we're going to raise our children.
yeah. Wow.
So I'm very intentional in bringing that into the space because a lot of things, we forget. We
Mm-hmm.
forget a lot of things. But
Mm,
when we remember certain things, it really helps us to put life into a different perspective. And people remember, okay, this is why my grandmother did this. This is what my grandmother taught me. And sometimes that brings them healing just to even remember that.
hmm I feel like I'm in a counseling session. I stop. I'm like, ah.
I know we just make our reflecting moments,
Yeah, I'm like,
And
my
I like the way
grandma always said to us that we had to love one,
we
everybody. We
have
had,
to.
she
I
was all
love
about that.
everyone cheering.
Yeah, we
Right,
have to love. So,
right. And my
We're just
grandmother,
always saying this.
she was a healer. So I know that, her blood is through my veins.
mhm.
My great grandmother was a healer. Her blood runs through my veins, and I acknowledge them every single day because if it was up to Quinella Renee Pringle, I just knew I was going to be like Miss Congeniality and be in the FBI. That's what I knew I was going to be. Okay, that's. I mean, my bachelor's is in criminal justice. Like, I came in the military to be a cop specifically so I could go to the FBI. So that was
That's
my
funny.
plan. That was my plan. But Ashe, they made it happen.
Life gets you where you need to go.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
pretty
Yeah.
much it does.
It
Yeah.
does, because just flashing back, Tiffany and I used to always say we're going to have a business together, but we called it a different name
Mhm.
for years. Like it's been like over 20 years, and it's like now we're actually doing something. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And you guys are doing magnificent things. I love seeing you out and about. I love seeing on your social media. I love seeing the people that you interview. Like, y'all are doing it. And I'm so proud of both of you.
Well,
Oh, thank
thank
you.
you, thank you. Thank God for Nikki, because Nikki's the pushing. She is the driving force because Tiffany be tired at times, but Nikki be like, "You can do it. You can do it." I give her so much slack for it. Sometimes I'm like, "No, I can't do it." She's like, "You can."
She said, you got me on this roller coaster ride, but she be enjoying the ride sometimes.
We've
Okay,
been enjoying the
driving.
ride,
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
but yeah. But just like Nikki was saying, like we've met a lot of people that blessed us with different nuggets of wisdom, and including you. And now you clear you were a part of the tribe before, but it's just like it's special when people take the time to
Yeah.
come out and just support you. And I really do appreciate you taking the time, especially
Yeah.
the knowledge that you're sharing. Because sometimes people don't know they need something until it hits
Mm-hmm.
them right smack dab
Mm-hmm.
in the face.
Mm,
Yeah.
And this is a topic that can overwhelm people so much.
Yeah.
They don't
yeah.
even know they need it, how to begin. And my prayer is whoever watches this, that when they look at it and they're like, wow, this is my answered prayer. How do I
Mm-hmm.
begin?
How do I
Mm,
My
begin?
healing process. How do I begin?
Yeah.
This was the answered prayer. And that's what I pray.
Yeah.
Because we don't have enough of these conversations. We don't.
Yeah. And I'm so thankful um, that I had to go through my own healing journey to truly understand the different complexities that I'll be facing today. Like, I never thought I'll be a doula. I lost a really good friend to postpartum psychosis. Mm-hmm. She unalived herself, and that was hard. That was hard. And I promised her kids, she had twins, I promised them that I will always keep their mom's legacy alive, through the work that I do. And I just never would have thought that this would have been my life path. Like I said, but God's will is greater than our own, because we really don't be knowing what we be doing. So, right, God just be like, got you.
Thank you for coming on. I learned so much. I feel like I went through a therapy session. I'm like, oh yeah. Like I feel like a weight has been off of me. Yeah. I feel like I sat back on the couch a little bit, the little Chase Lounge, and I got all the stuff out. It feels good. So with that being said, how can people contact you and reach you?
Oh, wonderful. So I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram, Sankofa Family Counseling. I do virtual services, so all through the state of South Carolina. And you can send me a text at 843-801-6070. I'll get back to you within 24 hours. But yeah, and I see a lot of my clients on the evenings, weekday evenings. And every now and then I'll do some weekends, but mostly in the evenings. So yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Let's unpack this trauma. Let's work on it.
Let's unpack it, right?
Yeah. Carrying that around.
And before we get off too, because we didn't have a chance, we were so focused on the family trauma, but also too as well, you do workforce or your consulting agency help organizations. So with their transition, can you tell us like a brief snippet of that too as well?
Absolutely. So I also own Cornerstone Visionaries, because the cornerstone of the community. And I work with nonprofit agencies who have family programs, and I do consultation with them. And so that's really exciting work, because it's so important for parents to get the support that they need. It may not be in a therapeutic sense, but maybe like some parenting classes, divorce education and things like that. So I work with several 501c3 nonprofits who have parenting type programs within their infrastructure, and just do some consulting and advising with them. There's a lot of small businesses that, if you think about it, each person has some type of family or relationship. And some small businesses don't have the opportunity to have like an HR, because they are a small business. So I do, just different types of workshops to help them build healthy relationships within their workforce and things of that nature.
Awesome.
Talented, just talented. God, she knows how to do a lot of things.
I know. We have for part 2 to just talk about that. Part 2 just to talk about that, because
well-rounded.
Never thought you needed help until like, hey.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
well,
but thank you both.
Thank you so much for coming on. I'll have all her information in the description box. And please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.
Thank you.